Praise the Lord, we're going to be doing part 2 of our testimony. Let's start with my twin brother, Claiborne.
Well, this is a part that I don't really enjoy telling about because some of our past is the past, but it's I'm not proud of our past. Some of the things we did was terribly wrong, and some of the things happened was for our own good, that we found the Lord through the circumstances. But anyway, as we were talking about, we were playing in the nightclubs, and we were down in New Orleans. We were walking down the street, and this girl we met, and so anyway, I ended up going out with her, and she ended up moving to Laurel, where we were living at the time. And so she moved in the house with me, and we were doing things wrong, not living as a married couple, but anyway, it was during that time I felt like it was destined for me to marry her. I can't even explain it, but I even told my brothers that it's just like it's something that I had to do. It wasn't because I was so much in love with her I wanted to marry her. It wasn't like that. It was just I felt that it was something I had to do. So anyway, we went to a justice of peace and got married, and we were married about 3 years. And one time when we were playing music, the group went to this other place. We went with David, our brother at this time. We had our own group because we wanted to do our drugs and things we were doing wrong. And but later on, David started doing drugs too. But anyway, my wife went down to New Orleans to where her parents live, and we were going somewhere else to play. And whenever I got back home that night, she didn't come back home. So I was upset. I knew something was. I was already feeling like something was going on in her life. And so whenever she got back home, I was very angry with her. But I was. She wasn't. She just acted like it was something that she just didn't make it back. I forget what she told me. But anyway, that night we went to bed, and I was still angry with her. I was just. We didn't have cell phones back then, and so anyway, while it was probably about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, the phone rang, and I picked the phone up, and so anyway. When I tried to answer it, it didn't come through, and so that I put the phone back down, and then probably in about just a little while later, that phone rang again, and and finally it came through, and this guy was on the other end of the phone, and he asked to speak to my wife. And so anyway, when he said that, I threw the phone off on the floor, and I got up and I went into the living room, and she came back in there and cursing and saying things about him and stuff, and I looked at her and I said, it's over. And I really meant that. It is over, but it was over anyway. She just came home to get her clothes. And so anyway, the next morning she left and took the car and left, but I had a Volkswagen van. And so anyway, I was going through a hard time in this season of my life, and my twin brother Rayburn, he ended up moving in the house there with me because it was a hard thing I was going through. So I don't know if it was so much the missing of her as it was my pride and ego, that I just couldn't believe that somebody would do me that way. So anyway, he moved in the house with me, and so anyway, we were playing this club in Laurel. I met this girl, and she ended up moving in the house with me. And so I was in a way, I was getting over my ex. Anyway, she called and asked for a divorce, and I ended up going to the people, and I told them about what was going on. And so anyway, I'll never forget this. I was telling them what happened, and then they gave me the divorce papers or whatever. I forget. It was a long time back. But anyway, that person, when I was leaving, he said, "Go in peace." And I never forgot that, and I did go in peace. So when I was living with that girl there, and I wasn't thinking about God at all. But during this time, God was dealing with me. We were playing at a outside festival thing for these bikers, and it was a terrible day. I can't even go into all the details of how terrible that day was. But anyway, I was in this van with this guy. He wanted to go to that concert thing with us. So I was riding with him, and that van that he had didn't have no seats in it. It was no seats except the two up front. And so I was sitting in the back, and those guys were smoking pot and doing things. And so anyway, that guy was talking to me, was turning around talking for a long time. And I thought to myself, he's going to have a wreck because he's not even watching the road. So I leaned out and looked out the window, and he was heading toward the bridge. So I said, "Wayne, watch that bridge." And he turned around real slowly and then turned the van away from that bridge. And then he got mad at me for telling him how to drive. So I thought to myself, "You're going to die in this van, have a bad wreck." So I was already depressed. I was going through some hard times. This was before I met the other girl that moved in the house with me. But anyway, I held on to the side of the van there. I thought, if we have a wreck, I'm going to hold on to this van, this side here, so I'll be safe. So I didn't realize if we had a wreck going that fast, I couldn't have held on to that side. But anyway, as I was laying there depressed and just wondering why is all these things happening to me, and all of a sudden my spirit left my body, and I was looking back down at myself, and it was a voice talking to me, and he was telling me that I've taken care of you all this time, and the reason that your wife left you is so you would come to me. So when I came back to myself, I didn't know it was God talking to me, but I knew then it was for a reason and a purpose, so, for that all those things happened to me. So I started getting over all that depression and things, and by then, that's when that girl moved into the house with me later on. And then one night I was in that room, and I was walking through the house, and Rayburn was in the living room, and he was doing something very strange. He had a Bible there, and I don't know where it came from, except we probably picked it up at one of those Motels 6s. So anyway, it was one of those easy reading Bibles, and he was over reading the Bible, and he said, "Claiborne, come here, let me read you something out of the Bible." And by this time, our hair was almost down our waist. We were way out there. And so anyway, he said, "Let me read you something out of the Bible." I said, "Man, I don't want to hear that." And I really didn't. But then he insisted. He said, just let me read just one thing to you. So I thought to myself, I'll let him read that one scripture and get him off my back, and I'll go my way. So I sat down beside him, and I'm not sure exactly what the scripture was, but he read me one scripture. And when that word hit my heart, God spoke to me audibly in my spirit. He told me, he said, "Just as unfaithful as your wife was to you, so are you to me." And I can't tell you in words how that pierced my heart. It hit so deeply that I ended up walking. I got up and I walked out of that room where he was. I went to the other room, and I got on my knees, and I started praying. I didn't even know how to pray, but I started asking God to forgive me for the things I've done wrong. And I got up from there, and I walked back in there where my twin was, and I was crying. I was shaking because I felt a power that come over me. And I told him, he said, "Do you want me to take you to the doctor?" He thought I was sick. I said, "No." I said, "We've got to turn from sin." And I said, "We got to make that girl in there." I don't know what word I used, but I knew I meant like a sister in the Lord. And so the next morning we tried to make our first convert. So from here, I'm going to get my twin brother to share some more things about our testimony. But God's been good to us, and
Praise the Lord. I appreciate that. It's because that brings back a lot of memories. But it's not all bad memories, because everything that happens is for a purpose. And so when Claiborne was going through such a hard time in his life, we were riding one night before this actually happened. This is part of what he shared, is part of our conversion. But before that happened, Claiborne got bitter towards people, especially women. That he felt like everybody had done him bad in life. And so one night I believe we was played at University of Alabama. We used to play for different fraternity parties. And so that night, the people there gave us a bunch of beer to take with us on our trip, which was a bad thing. So we got in the van, started riding down the road. And I was driving, and Claiborne's over there, and we never cursed. We might spell something out, but we never would curse. And all of a sudden, Claiborne started doing something very unusual. He never did this before. He started this using the Lord's name in vain. And so he kept saying it. I said, Claiborne, I said, man, don't you do that. He said, God's cool. He knows where I'm at. He felt like that, and which was a good interpretation, actually, at the time, because God did know that he was going through such a hard battle in his life. And so I said, you shouldn't do that. And he kept cursing. So I just, driving down the road, I just pulled back and I punched that windshield really hard and busted the windshield, and then I pulled off the road, and the guys in the band thought we were going to get out and fight, but we never fought in our lives. You know, we might hit each other on the arm or something, but we never ever hitting each other in the face or anything like that. We just weren't raised like that. So the next day was, every time I had to drive that van, I had to get over here and look out so I could see the road, because I busted that windshield good. And so that was the beginning of our, and one night I was at the recording studio with David, and I was leaving the studio, and he could remember exactly the place that we were at, and I know exactly the place also, because that night was a very special night God had ordained. And so when we started leaving the studio, David said to me, Rayburn, he said, there's more to the Bible than what people have told us. And when he said that, I really, I wasn't really into what he was saying, but and I remember we were both smoking pot that night leaving, and that was pretty cool to me, because David never did smoke pot before. So but David's saying there's more to the Bible than what people have told us. So from there, what happened was I started reading the Bible, and all of a sudden when I started reading the Bible, I read that scripture to Claiborne. And the reality came to him that Claiborne was living in sin. And so he came back in the room, he was shaking real hard, and what he said to me, he said, we have to turn from sin, we got to make Mandy like a sister. That was the girl he was living with. And Mandy was a beautiful girl, great person. She loved to dance. I mean, she'd do that little, I forget the name of the little dance, but she was really a talented person. She came from a well family in Laurel, but she lived a life of drugs and shooting drugs and drinking a lot of Jack Daniels. And we got where we was drinking a lot of Jack Daniels because she was drinking Jack Daniels. We started drinking it, and so then what happened was years later she overdosed. That's what everybody says happened to her. They found her dead in a bathtub. But before that happened, we actually saw her before she died, and we'd come to the Lord, and she met some guy in New Orleans and married him, and she had a little baby, and she came back to Laurel, and she was walking down the road, and we saw her, and we pulled over and said, Mandy, are you okay? She was crying. We said, are you okay, Mandy? And she just said yes and walked off. And it wasn't long after that she passed away. And so I know the devil's his job is to kill, steal, and destroy. But our conversion started like that, but that's only the beginning of what God was doing in our lives. All of a sudden, as God came into our lives, we was living something we never lived before, and that was a separated life unto the Lord. And I will share on we'll share on the next video about what God actually started to speak into us, words of prophecy, words of wisdom and understanding that we didn't understand at the time, but we understand what he's talking about now very clearly. We'll get back with that.